Let me give y'all a little introduction to Mitchell Jackson. I have to start personally because I've known Mitchell now almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And we meet sort of in the space that a lot of writers meet, which is at Writers Conference. And I remember Mitchell and I sitting in a hotel room talking about everything about from how to support young artists to the NBA,
Yeah.
to college basketball. And we just kept meeting up and hanging, and we'd always find each other at these conferences.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has been so amazing about Mitchell that you wouldn't know, because if you're just getting to know him now, you're getting to know him through this book, is that he's such a supporter of writers. Mitchell often champions other writers in ways that he doesn't have to, making sure their literature, their work is being put in the world. And so I want to thank Mitchell for that. And you kind of see that in this book, right? The way in which he's highlighting other folks' ideas about fashion and aesthetics. So I'll read you the sort of bio, just so you know a little bit more about Mitchell. Mitchell S. Jackson is the winner of the 2021 Pulitzer Prize in feature writing and the 2021 National Magazine Award in feature writing. He is the critically acclaimed author of The Residue Years, Survival Math, and the forthcoming John Watts. Survival Math, which came out in 2019, was named Best Book of the Year by NPR, Time, the Paris Review, and The Root, Kirkus Reviews, BuzzFeed, and many, many more. Jackson is a contributing writer for the New York Times Magazine and covers race and culture as the first black columnist in the history of Esquire. His writing has also been featured on the cover of the New York Times Magazine, the New York Times Book Review, Time, Esquire, as well as The New Yorker, Harper's Magazine, New York Times, the Paris Review, and the Washington Post, and elsewhere. Jackson serves as the John O. Whiteman Dean's Distinguished Professor in the Department of English at Arizona State University. Fly, beautiful book. The Big Book of Basketball Fashion has been celebrated by Nina Garcia, the editor-in-chief of Elle magazine. Garcia writes, Mitchell S. Jackson expertly fuses fashion and basketball, showing why players' off-court style can be as impactful as they do in the game. Jason Reynolds, New York Times bestselling author, co-author of Stamp, declares, in Fly, Jackson does more than compile a basketball/fashion lookbook, and it's more than a timeline in history. To me, what he explores is the evergreen push to remind people that the talented are more than their talents, that there's a burning creativity and relentless desire to express oneself, not as a highlight, but as a human. Please join me in welcoming Mitchell Jackson to the Texas Book Festival. All right, so
Can I add to my bio that
Please.
I take L's to Roger in literary contests? 8 years or so ago, I just want to put that on the table.
we talk about the literary deathmatch.
And also that Roger is also a committed member of our community. I have questions about jobs or fellowships. I text Roger. Roger gives you the green bubble, though. I will say that, he's not in the Apple family, but it's fine. He's still a good brother. I just wanted to enter those two things into the conversation.
Yeah, I'm Roger Reeves. I'm a writer as well. But yeah, me and Mitchell, we go back. We have so much. I mean, like, one of the things we talk basketball a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And so one of the games I remember watching was Wichita Shockers. What year was that? They had been like 23-0.
Yeah.
We watched the NCAA tournament together.
Yeah.
And it was at a writers' conference. We was just like, all right, we're going to stop being a writer for a second and go watch this game.
That was a great game, yeah.
So I want to start with this question, or something that you actually start the book with, which is a discussion of style.
Yeah.
Right? And even some of the interviews that are in the book you ask sort of designers and they say that's a really complicated question, right?
Yeah.
So what for you is style?
I'm glad that you asked that. I wish I could define it and say this is my own definition of it, but I think, I do think that style is a point of view that is grounded in aesthetics, right? So in order for you to be stylish, and if we're talking about fashion, that you have to first have a sense of your identity, like who you are, what you believe in, what you disbelieve in. and then you have to have a certain set of aesthetics that you're operating by, right? So like, you like this color versus this color. You like this shape versus this shape. You like this texture or not this texture, or you like a certain combination. So it's never just you threw something on because, even when it looks that way. And, it's very much, to me, the way that great writers, or the writers that I admire at least, work on the page. I had a student, I was teaching at the Kenyon Review last summer, and had a student that was remarkable. I mean, great. And she, at the time, she shared some work in class, and then she told me that she was going to publish some pieces. One was coming out in the Atlantic, the other one was coming out in the New York Times. And I was like, okay, well, cool. Hit me when they're out. And she sent them to me, or sent one to me yesterday. And I read it, and it was good. And the information was there, and it was an important story. But I was like, I don't know she wrote it. Like, you could have took her name off of it, and anyone, staff writer, could have wrote that. And it was so much different than the voice that I had heard over the summer. And I'm going to email her back, and I'm going to say, this is great, but this isn't the person that I know from this summer. And so I think a thing about style is, what Miles said, you got to have it in everything you do.
I love that. So I want to keep going down this style route, right?
Yeah.
So you said you had to know who you are. So it starts aesthetically. But what you do, very interestingly, is connect it to the ethos, what's going on politically, socioculturally, in the world and nation, right? Like, you begin several chapters by historically grounding the era of fashion. For instance, you begin the flamboyant era, right, by discussing the date that Lyndon B. Johnson signs the Civil Rights Law and Act. So, talk to us about why you begin sort of that way and thinking about how that connects to style.
Yeah, well, I think what is free choice, right? We all think we get up, we look in our closet, and we make a decision on what to wear. But what's in our closet is determined by someone else, right? What brands are popular, probably, what tariffs are on what clothes that come in from Asia or wherever they're coming from, right? So, like, those options aren't really options of ours wholly. Then I also think, we have places. I mean, I was in prison for a little while, right? I couldn't wear what I wanted to wear while I was there. There were mandates about what you could and couldn't wear. I went to the hole for a do-rag. A do-rag. I wanted to keep my waves down, and that was illegal. I suffered for these waves. I just want y'all to know that. So I think that whatever is happening socially or politically or culturally is really giving us a set of almost strictures about what we can and can't do. Really also about identity, right? Like, they're shaping our identity, which then goes into, okay, what am I going to wear? How am I going to wear it? How are people going to respond to this, right? Is this a reflection of me? So I think all of those, it's never just, I got this item and I want to wear it.
It's so interesting because I want to stay in the 60s for a moment, because that was, I think you call that era like that's the flamboyance.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that also, I'm thinking about the Panthers are in that era, right?
Yeah.
Like, the Panthers are like, and that Panther era of that type of political dandyism.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And so can you talk a little bit about sort of what is happening politically and what the basketball players are thinking about in terms of,
So I think in order to define any era, I should say, the book is divided into 6 eras. In every era, I try to define what was happening in the culture by something socially, politically, culturally. And the first era is pre-civil rights, and I call it the era of conformists. So I think in order to define the era of flamboyance, we have to know that conformity was before that. And so I mark the kind of shift from conformity to a kind of dandyism, or what I call flamboyance, with the civil rights movement and black people really coming to believe that they are at least legally free in America. And certainly, if you look at what was happening in the late 1960s, early 1970s, we get the Black Panthers and the leather jackets and the berets. We get Martin Luther King in the suits and the ties. And really, right after that, we get blaxploitation. We get, bell-bottom pants and butterfly collars and afros, right? And so to me, that's an expression of a kind of sartorial freedom that these people felt, in which, again, that was political, right? That was political and cultural, the reasons why they felt that freedom, and they were expressing it, right? Like, I don't think we've had, probably not since the 70s, to now, have we had an era in which the fashion was like less gendered, more risky, depending on how you define risk, like all of these things. Like, we're living in a kind of re-70s era, but that era was certainly an era. And also, if you think about the NBA, the early 1970s is also when the league merged with the ABA, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening culturally and socially that are giving us Dr. J and Walt Clyde Frazier.
So I want to think something you said in that book, which was really like, I was like, reading closely. That's what I do. I'm a poet and professor, so I read sentences really closely. But you talk about style as aspirational.
Yes.
Right? Which to my mind makes me think that style is an announcement of possibility.
Yeah.
But an act of creating and commenting on the future, which I think is really interesting, right? Like, style as an announcement, because we always think of style as such a present thing.
Yeah.
Right? And particularly the 70s is one of these moments where everything seems to be future-oriented, right?
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, how has style functioned in the NBA in terms of, like, I'm thinking about, right, like the Iverson era,
yeah.
right? When they institute the
dress code.
Dress code.
Yep.
But the way in which I'm gonna twin that with, this is the era also where the NBA's collective bargaining gets really, really strong.
Yeah.
And I don't know if y'all know, but the NBA is has one of the best unions.
Yeah, they do.
Of any workforce in the country, right? They are a player-centered kind of workplace, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to, how can we see that sort of, does that make sense?
Absolutely. When you were talking about fashion of the league, I was thinking how fashion itself usually comes out of depressed communities, right? And so the use of fashion is to assert possibilities, to try to attain at least a perception of a life that you have been denied. Right, and if you think about hip hop and where that came from, right, like comes out of the Bronx is, it's still a depressed community, but if you can imagine it in the 1970s. So so if you watch interviews of fashion designers, usually they'll tell you, like, they go scout Soho and Paris for the neighborhoods where the young kids are really pushing the boundaries, right? And so I think that the other thing is that not by and large, the NBA players are coming out of those same communities, right? So they are, basketball is aspirational. What would make you think that of all, I remember when I was young, they used to say it's a 1 in a million shot to go to the NBA. That's when the NBA was a national sport. The NBA is now a global sport, right? With China being one of its biggest markets. So what the hell are the odds of you going to the NBA now with it being a global sport? So for you to imagine that you could get that far down the road of basketball is an act of achieving the impossible. And so why wouldn't these young men then do the same kind of thing in other aspects of their life? And I do think that the NBA, the players have more power in the NBA than in any other league. There's a picture towards the end. I think it's the second to last. I think it's the last era where LeBron is at the NBA bubble. He's with the Lakers. They are at mid-court. They're kind of arm in arm, but LeBron is kneeling. He has a Black Lives Matter T-shirt on, and he has his fist up. To me, that's like 3 levels of protest. He on his knee. Y'all saw what they did to Cap about his knee. He got the black fist up in the center court of the NBA bubble, and he got a Black Lives Matter T-shirt on, right? Like, anybody in any other league, he probably would be blackballed out of that league. And so I think that the league recognized, I mean, to me, that's an assertion of LeBron and his power. Maybe, another player could not have done that, but not too long ago, we had Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, right, in the NBA.
Come on, talk about
Chris Jackson, one of the best guards, college guards for sure, we've ever seen, who refused to stand because of his faith, because he was a Muslim and was blackballed out of the league. And so for them to get from that point to LeBron at center court with a black fist and a Black Lives Matter t-shirt on his one knee, that is extraordinary.
That's something that I think the NBA is so interesting about, even in protesting, the way in which that's a historical protest.
Yes.
Right? Like, because it's referring back to the Olympics and Tommy Smith. Right?
Yep.
And it's bringing the sort of knee of Kaepernick, right? The Black Lives Matter of the present, right?
Yep.
It's bringing it all into this one moment,
Absolutely.
right? It's such a sort of pivotal moment. Also, this is just they also did a wildcat strike in the bubble.
Yeah.
And I don't know if y'all know what a wildcat strike is, but that's like one of the most radical things you can do, which is to just like walk out of work.
Yeah.
Right? And they walked out. Right?
Whole team.
And they stopped the playoffs.
Yeah.
I really wish they would have went all the way through, because that would have been profound.
Yeah.
Right? To stop. I mean, those are the people that can stop the money, right? Like they can stop the sort of mechanisms of U.S. capital in that way. So we'll get back to fashion. So you talk about
it's all fashion.
It's all fashion, actually. It's all part of fashion. It's true. So I have to ask you a personal thing, right here, which is, so you break down the book into several areas, right? The flamboyant area, the conformist area. What is your favorite era, and what is your favorite outfit that an NBA player has worn? I know that's a hard. You might have to give me top 5. You can give me an era, I know.
All right. I am going to say the era of flamboyance, which I know I keep referring to, but to me, it's like the biggest shift.
Okay.
If you look at what the NBA looked like, the NBA started in 1946, got its first black player in 1950. There was a cap on black players. There were 3 players that came in, but it really didn't become a black league until the mid-1970s or early 1970s. So I think that's important to note. But we get Dr. J, right, who comes over from the ABA, who I think he's like my all-time style icon in the league. A lot of people say Walt Frazier. I do not say Walt Frazier, and I don't say him because I think, and we can talk about this, Walt Frazier got stuck. Okay. I think that a lot of people who receive adulation for something oftentimes get stuck in doing that same thing so they can receive that same love. So Walt Frazier was an icon of fashion in the 1970s. But if you look at him now, he is wearing a version of what he was wearing in the 1970s. On the other hand, Dr. J was arguably just as stylish, maybe not as risk-taking as Walt Frazier, but now has evolved. Like, I saw a picture of Dr. J holding this book, and he had on some shorts, a bomber, and a fitted cap.
Oh, wow.
Dr. J, like 70-something years old. Like, and then you'll see him judging the NBA dunk contest in a few months.
That's true.
And he'll have on a tailored suit. His afro was, Dr. J had the best afro in the league in the 70s. Now his, salt and pepper, like, to me, he's evolved over these 40 years, whereas Walt Frazier is still doing his Walt Frazier. So I'm going to say the era of flamboyance because we got those 2 men who are the icons of NBA style. And then I would say it's not the best outfit. To me, it's the most iconic outfit. And it's also in the book. I'm not trying to plug the book. That shit sound like I'm a salesman.
It's all in the book.
It's all in the book. You can buy the book. Do it. It's LeBron, the night that he broke Kareem's record. I don't know if y'all seen this picture, but I remember seeing him walk, or video, I think, of him walking into the Lakers arena. Was it Crypto, I think it is?
Yep.
Crypto Arena. And he had on a black sheen, looked like satin or silk suit. He had a black shirt on. His inseam was like on his pants. He had on some velvet shoes. He had a lapel pin that said "Stay Present." He had his drip on, the bracelets, the necklaces, like, and he had some dark shades on. I said, "Oh man, homie about to break this record tonight." Because you cannot dress like that. It's aspirational. You cannot dress like that and not break the record. And he did. And the other thing about that is Bron needed over 30 points that night. So it wasn't like he was like, "Oh, I need 6 points. Of course I'm going to break the record." No, 30 points is a great game by anybody's standard.
That's right.
And so for me, the audacity of I'm going to break the record tonight and I need 30 points, which means I know I'm going to have a good game. And then to dress in a way that signal, like he had a party already set up.
Yeah,
right? Like, Bron breaking his record tonight, right?
Yeah,
like, can you imagine going to that party? Like, "Oh, man, Bron, sorry you didn't get that 4 points, dog. Shit would have been nice, you know?" Like, so for me, they said it was the most impossible record in sports.
That's right.
Right?
That's
So
right.
he breaks the most impossible record in sports. He needs 30-something points to do it, and he dresses like a superstar going into that arena. And for me, that's the most memorable outfit.
Man, there's so many questions. Okay, can I ask about the Jordan era?
Yes, you can.
Okay, coach. We're gonna go a little era by era. And then I'm
They buy Nikes too.
During the Jordan era fashion, which introduces the Jordan sneaker, the baggy basketball short, the gold hoop earring, you also have a sort of countercultural figure icon, Dennis Rodman.
Yes.
Right? I can't help but think of Rodman, right? This is the memory. I remember when Rodman wears the wedding dress to his book signing,
Yes.
right? Announces I'm bisexual and I'm marrying myself,
Yes.
right? That was scandalous to my mother.
Yeah.
Scandalous.
Everybody, mama. Yes.
And I remember my mom being like, "God, can you believe this?" Right? And so I'm interested in what does Dennis Rodman open up or make possible through his sartorial decisions. Also because he's not, like, what's interesting about Rodman is he was never, quote unquote, like, you know, now we talk about NBA players being soft if they're shooting 3 points. Right?
Yeah.
You love Barkley and Shaq all
Yeah.
Oh, this league is soft, whatever. Rodman was grabbing boards. Rodman was a boots
Bad boys.
workman type of player, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in, like, the sort of ways in which he complicates masculinity, complicates fashion,
Yeah.
particularly in this Jordan era, because he was so kind of like the dilettante. Right?
Yes.
He's the Basquiat of that
Yes.
era in that some way.
Yes. I think we have to look at that era. It's called the Jordan era for a reason, and I think Jordan to me is a representation of. I used to teach this essay. Bret Easton Ellis, Notes on Charlie Sheen and the End of an Empire. And it was an essay in which he defined different eras of celebrity. And he called it empire and post-empire. He said the empire celebrity was one whose like whole life was kind of shaped for public consumption. You didn't really know what was happening in their private life. They were always perfect when we saw them. And I think that the most significant representations of an empire celebrity at that era were Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan. Right? Like two guys who you didn't see what the handlers didn't want you to see.
That's right.
There was a little crack in Jordan when we found out about the gambling and his father, but for the most part, you didn't know nothing about Mike until The Last Dance. And then Michael Jackson, obviously, he kept a lot of information from us. And so I think the Iverson era is an era in which we get away from that, where Iverson is almost like the antithesis of the Jordan era. I think Rodman fits into that era because he was pushing boundaries. But it's very easy to look at him now and say, "Oh, these guys in 2023 are doing what Rodman was doing." But I think it's actually fundamentally different. Because I think what Rodman was doing, he was doing for shock value. I don't think that Rodman believed in that. I think he believed in freedom and freedom of expression, but I don't believe that he thought that what he was doing was fashionable. I think these young people now think that what they're doing is fashionable. When they paint their nails or they wear a Tom Brown skirt or they dye their hair, it's now fashionable. So yeah, Rodman, he turns out to be like an unwitting kind of marker of what's going to happen in the future. But I think that he was thinking something totally different about what he like the wedding dress and I'm bisexual. That was shocking, right? He was trying to shock us versus these guys. This is normal now.
Yeah. Okay. It's interesting because then is Rodman performance artist? Like much more performance.
Yeah. Don't forget he was dating Madonna.
Right.
Right. Like he was getting and he didn't start really going crazy till he started dating celebrity women. Right. So take a look at. I'm sure if we could track like his Madonna days and see how much Rodman really started going into what we know as Rodman, right? MTV Music Award. Because the other thing is, that was an era where you had to be a star in order, like Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, like the Dream Team, right? You couldn't be a handyman, which is basically what he was a glorified handyman, right? He did one thing really good. You could not be a star without doing something else. And so I think he recognized that he was living in an era where if he didn't do something that was shocking, he was going to be Charles Oakley. Y'all don't know what Charles Oakley is, do you? Help Jordan get them rebounds.
That's right. All right, so I want to skip a little, Allen Iverson era.
Yes.
Right? Tall tees.
Tall tees.
Tee.
Yeah, oh, my God.
Oh, my goodness. You remember them tall tees?
Yes,
Remember them 3XLs?
Yes.
I don't know if y'all, this is the early 2000s. This
Got
is
mine from the swap meet.
Man, come on,
5
man.
for 20.
Man.
Never to be worn again.
That's my college era. That's college undergrad, right?
Yeah.
What was... I want you to talk a little bit about... It's interesting because you have the tall tee era.
Yeah.
And then you also have... I want you to talk a little bit about white parties.
Yeah. Ooh.
You see,
these
are kind of so tell the people about what a white party is.
Yeah.
Right. And sort of what the white party was, because they don't do them as much as they used to do the white party.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the white party. I actually had no one has asked me about the white parties.
I wrote on the white party for ESPN that one time.
Oh, that's right.
That's why I'm asking about it.
So now the guy that owns the Sixers does probably the biggest party of the year, 4th of July. It's white. But before him, Russell Simmons used to do a white party in the Hamptons. And around that time, Diddy was doing his all-white party. And I mentioned those guys because that was like the apex of luxury rap, right? So we got Diddy and Jay-Z basically showing the nouveau riche what it looks like when you get real bread. You get on a yacht, you buy or rent a house in the Hamptons, you wear all white, you get a Jacob the Jeweler watch, like you buy a Maybach, you get a driver. Like these are all possibilities, right? Aspirational. And this is also strangely at the same time that like cocaine rap and street rap are becoming the most prominent aspects of hip hop, right? And so those are like you at the white party, but you got on a white tee with jeans and a Timberland, and you got a do-rag on, right? Like, you go back and look at, maybe not Diddy so much, but you go back and look at what Jay-Z was wearing. You go back and look at, I'm trying to think who else from that. It wasn't really DMX. He was, like, anti that. But maybe, like, early Ja Rule. Like, these guys were kind of, it was really, I guess now postmodern, right? In the way that they were mixing high and low
I like
culture. Right? So, I think it's really important. That era cannot be defined outside of hip-hop. It really is just another extension of hip-hop.
That's right. That's right.
I think Iverson, who is the GOAT of that era, the most important person in that era, for me, Iverson is like the Tupac of basketball. I did an event last week with Santi, Elijah, I think Holly is his last name. He wrote a book on the Shakurs. And it was talking about, I mean, we know Tupac, right? But then there's his mother, who a lot of people know from the Black Panthers. But then there are like uncles and his stepdad and all these other people who were famous or infamous for their political activism and their radical actions and thought. And so if you think about that, Tupac came to us as a rap star already mythologized. And Iverson was a star basketball player. Was it Newport? Where is he from?
Newport, Virginia. Newport News.
Gets in a brawl his senior year, gets incarcerated, gets a governor's pardon, then goes and plays for the most famous, probably black college basketball player in the history of college basketball, right? Then he's the #1 pick. So he's already mythologized before he ever steps foot in the NBA. And he's mythologized in the same way that Pac was, right? It's like half infamy, half self-determination. Yeah. And so I think that is why, because everybody, like I just saw Melo a couple nights ago. He was doing it too, but he didn't have the mythology that Iverson did. And so if you marry the mythology to what Iverson was able to accomplish on the court, and then what hip-hop was doing, right, which hip-hop is reaching its apex, while Iverson is reaching his apex too, like, that's like the perfect storm.
Yeah. I love that. I love the way you're thinking about that. Like the mythology and sort of the largeness of these figures, because Iverson is that large. I mean,
definitely.
Here, I have 2 more questions, and then y'all start preparing y'all questions, right? Because there's an audience participation to this thing. So one of the questions is, this is the question I was like, I'm gonna ask this question. Who do you think is a slept-on NBA style icon?
Ooh.
You know, like we can think of we can think of Kobe being in the ads and the fashion ads. We can think of Jordan, right? But like, who do you think is like somebody we know that you're like, oh, that person actually was, because you've combed through so many pictures,
I'm gonna pick one from the olden days and one from now. I would say a person that. Damn, that's hard when we think about like the 80s, because they all did the same. Nobody was pushing anything in the 80s. Everybody wore the same suits. They wore them big ass Jordans, drapes.
That's true.
Man, that's hard. Magic. I'm gonna say Magic.
That's a good one.
Because there's the iconic photo. For me, the picture that I described about LeBron, there is a maybe equally as memorable photo of Magic coming in. It's a meme. Magic coming into the Forum in a mink coat. And again, to me, that's like Magic is walking down there like, this my Forum. I'm Showtime.
That's right.
So for me. And it's also, like, if you think about Magic, like, you see Magic now, he like a grandpa, he always smiling, but Magic came through like, I run this mother. And so to me, that, the mink coat, you gotta really feel good about yourself to wear a mink coat. I went out one time with my partner, and it's gotta be, so I used to write bios. This is a tangent. I used to write bios, and I wrote a bio for a guy who owned a mink company at the time. And I was like, man, you ain't got to pay me, man. Just give me some minks. He gave me a couple rabbits, but I had a couple minks. So I get my black mink and my partner, just me and him this night. We go to whatever. I can't remember whatever club was popping in New York, but it was popping. And we go out. I got on the mink. I got on some 501s and some boots. We get in the club, and I get in there, and I'm like, ooh, I don't feel comfortable in this. I feel like not myself. So we coming out. I spent the whole night in the club with the mink on. I ain't take it off, though. You can't lay your mink down in the club. It's gone. So we come out, you leaving, and I look at him and I say, bro, why did you let me wear this mink? He said, sometimes you got to let your partner jump out the window. But Magic didn't look to have any of that apprehension when he was coming through the Forum in his mink. So I'm going to go with Magic. And then now I am going to go with Nickeil Alexander. So he's Shay's cousin.
Oh, okay.
So Shay has been voted the most fashionable man in the world
Shai Gilgeous,
2 times in a row. by GQ. Not most fashionable NBA player, most fashionable man. So that also shows you where NBA fashion is, right? That
That's
like
right.
they're running fashion. But his cousin, who's not a star in the league, was a good player, is also very, very fashionable. But because he hasn't reached and may never reach that level of notoriety, a lot of people don't like. You go look at Shea, he got millions and millions of followers. You go look at Nikel, I think he got a couple 100,000. But Nikel, he be on it.